Hi everybody, my name is Samara Mumtaz and I am a student of Mohawk College and also a placement student at this semester at Missing Links, Filling the Gaps to Autism, which is a private agency based in Burlington that service individuals who have autism and help improve and recover their life. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the final project that I was privileged enough to have the opportunity to do at Missing Links. It was a matching program to improve word recognition skills for a client in the intensive behavioral intervention offered at Missing Links. Again, I will not unfortunately be able to go into as deep of detail as I would love to. However, I would encourage any questions or comments that you would have to offer. I would love any sort of feedback, so please don't hesitate to reach out. So again, because of time restriction, I'm just going to jump right in. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the client's history, and I will try and cater it specifically to the program that I was able to plan and implement for this client. Then I will indeed go into a little more detail about specifically the criteria of the program. We'll discuss a little bit the methods and materials that I use to implement the program. Finally, we will discuss some of the results which were quite interesting for me to both observe and intriguing and discussion filled, which is something I loved. It was a great learning opportunity, even when it didn't go exactly as planned. And finally, we'll discuss some of the future steps that I thought of while finishing up this project and think that would be a great improvement towards the rest of this program. So talking a little bit about the history of my client, it was noted through previous assessments that the client at an early stage was slow to develop speech and language, also motor skills, but with assistance of speech therapy and physiotherapy was able to catch up to her peers. The client's social communication and play skills were also affected. This again goes hand in hand with the speech language, and we found that in early age and also currently, the client faces difficulty when it comes to open-ended questions, especially when it comes to having conversations. Parents also observed challenges with the client's letter and number recognition, which is also something that we see in the programs that are currently being offered through the client's sessions. And these may be related to the fact that we have observed difficulty when it comes to attending and maintaining focus, especially when in a learning environment. So some of the earlier assessments done for the client included the Wechsler Preschool and Primary Scale of Intelligence, and in the domains of receptive vocabulary, verbal comprehension, visuospatial, and vocabulary acquisition, the client ranked between the 33rd and 5th percentile. And of course, we find this to be developmentally low. So in the Vineland Adaptive Behavioral Scales, we found that the client was actually ranked in the 8th percentile in the categories of receptive, expressive, and written communication. So based on these assessments, as well as previous history that I have not unfortunately gone into detail with, one of the client's main areas of needs was definitely improvement in skill deficits around the language arts. Dr. Seuss said, "The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you will go." This very old, very well-known quote very simply, beautifully, and profoundly summarizes why I chose this specific program for the client, why I was drawn to this specific program. Literacy is a privilege that I think every individual should be enabled with. And the program, as I'll go into a little more detail later on, the program that I've chosen specifically deals with conceptually, it deals with teaching word recognition through matching skills. Now, word recognition and literacy go hand in hand. You'll see in the description box of this video that I have listed some references, and these are the references that I used to support the importance of word recognition for literacy and reading comprehension and the effect that that could have on an individual's life. So in the articles that I looked at, the theme was that word recognition is important because a solid development of word recognition is what allows in the future an individual to then put the majority of effort on the meaning retrieval of a word instead of the recognition of the word, so that there is better reading comprehension. Now, reading comprehension I find is so valuable, and especially in this field, it's essential to many of the simplest life skills. It's so essential to productive and functional life skills. And giving an example specifically in this field, for a developing child who's affected by autism, having reading comprehension allows tools such as written schedules to independently shape that individual by allowing them to complete tasks, again, independently. By using step-by-step guides and task analyses, they're allowed to independently adhere to routines. By having social stories, they can independently and smoothly transition into for future activities and be prepared for future activities. And all of these things require reading comprehension, which I believe requires word recognition, of course. So quickly talking about specifically my program, the goal of this program was that when the client is given the instruction to match or to put with the same, she will be able to match the word strips to those same words written in a different font. This is the overall goal. And this is when that word would be presented among a 3-word strip array, and she would be asked to do it within 5 seconds. So this is the criteria for successful completion, ultimately, of the program. Now, this goal is broken down into 4 steps. And the scope of this goal includes that there are 4 targets for each step. And there are 12 targets for each step, but only 4 are put into acquisition at one time. So in order to master the program, the client must first master the first step, and then the second, and then the third, and then the fourth. And once the fourth is mastered, the program has overall been mastered, and it will be put into maintenance. So the correct response would include the following, and this would be an overall for all of the steps and all of the different targets, that she is able to correctly and independently identify the matching word by placing that word on the same word presented in the array. So now, specifically, the different criteria for each step. In level 1, when presented with the array of 3-word strips, the clients, these 3-word strips would all contain different letters with the same font, so they're very easy to discriminate, and the client would be given the word strip and asked to match the word. In the second strip, again, the therapist will present an array of 3-word strips, but all will contain one similar letter and will be the same font. So now it's a little bit harder to discriminate. The client really has to pay attention to looking at the letters in the words in the order that they're in before, and then scanning to find the same among the array before she puts it down. In the third step, it gets a little bit more indiscriminate, and that is that the therapist presents an array of 3 word strips all containing 2 similar letters and having the same font. In the fourth step, it is identical to the third, except that now it will be a different font. So again, we're making it more difficult to discriminate, and the client really has to focus and attend to the task at hand. These are the materials that were initially used for the program. I did modify a little bit, and I'll discuss that towards the end, and it was in relation to the generalization of the program. So you'll see that the first target set that was created, I called it target set 1. These were for each step, level 1, 2, 3, 4, according to the criteria for each of those levels. And this is the second target set. And what you'll notice, they're different because we have different letter groupings and happening here, just to make it a little more variable and to ensure that the client is able to generalize the skill among different conditions. So how the procedure for implementing this program happened is that, again, the client was presented with 3 words in an array. The client was then given another word strip matching one of the word matching one of the other words in the array. I'll make a quick note to point out that this current picture was for the level 4, where all the 3 words had 2 similar letters in common, but that the words presented to the client given to match, and those that were presented in the array were different fonts, so that they were more difficult to discriminate. And so the client was given this word and given the instruction match, and then expected to match within 5 seconds to its correct one, both independently and accurately. The next picture that I'm about to show you just goes to illustrate that the importance of shuffling the different word strips in the array between the trials, just to ensure that there is not a rote response, that the response is genuinely according to the concept of the skill. So in terms of results, there was a baseline conducted on April 14th, and it was conducted for target set number 1, and for all the levels, because the first target set was what was to go into acquisition, starting with level 1. And what we found was that for level 1, 2, 3, the client actually got 100% correct responses, and we were very happily surprised to find that the client was very, very quick and accurate when placing the word and matching it to the presented array. And so when we conducted the 4th level, which was the hardest, in target set 1, their client only got 1 response incorrect, and the others again were accurate and quick and independent. So because the client technically baselined right out of the first 3 steps after consulting both the director and the senior therapist, we found that there was not a need to put levels 1, 2, and 3 into an acquisition phase. We chose to only put level 4, but we were also curious to see how the client would do when we presented the second target set, which were very different words, and we only presented levels 3 and 4. We found that levels 1 and 2 may be too easy, but we presented levels 3 and 4 of target set 2, and we found again that the client got 100% correct responses for both levels. When we put the program into its acquisition phase, skill acquisition phase, what we found that I did conduct 3 sessions. Again, time only permitted me to do 3, but what we found was in the first session, the client again only got 1 response wrong. The other 3 were correct. In the second session and the third session, the client got all 4 targets correct 100%. So talking a little bit about that, in terms of generalization, we found that this program seemingly was too simple, at least at this level. And so the reason that we had decided to go with 3-word letters instead of 4 was taking into account the client's current standing in word recognition for other programs and the challenges she faced, as well as her history with letter number recognition, as well as other things seen in the learning environment and those by the director and her senior therapists. We had all agreed that 3 words would be the best point to start off with, and it set a great baseline for us, and it really gave us a great direction in future steps. So in terms of generalization, once this target set is acquired, what I suggest would be that we try, first of all, different letter groups. So like we had the AT level group in target set 1, and the UN letter group in target set 2, we also now differentiate again the letter groupings. So now maybe perhaps look at IP letter groupings, but also vary the font. So you'll see how level 1 fonts in target set 3 are different from level 1 fonts in target set 1. And they're also different in level 4 as compared to in target set 3 as compared to in target set 1. So that's one step. The other step, of course, once that is acquired, we understand that the skill is being generalized. We would like to make it more difficult to ensure that the matching and recognition part is also, the skill is really being picked up. So now it would involve having words that are 4 letters, words that are 5 letters, and being matched. In terms of maintenance, the agency standard is to conduct, after the program has been mastered, in terms of the acquisition phase, to put it in maintenance phase by probing once a week for 3 consecutive weeks. Now, I did not mention exactly how data is taken, and I'll go back to that. But again, maintenance would be taken once a week for 3 weeks. If the client is unsuccessful, then the program would go back into an acquisition phase. However, the lead therapist would first analyze the situation completely, just to ensure that it is the learning aspect that is hindering the client from being successful. So going back really quickly, one thing I didn't mention was how data is taken. And so in order to attain mastery, in every session for these programs, the client is first probed on the targets. And if the client is successful, they're given a yes, and then they're moved on to the next target. In the event that the client is unsuccessful, that is when we continue probing the rest of the targets. And when we've finished probing, we now go back to the unsuccessful targets and we go through a teaching phase. And so in this case, we would use the most to least prompting method. And what we would do is, while conducting most to least, we would also ensure that we are using the most effective increased prompt. So based on the capability of the client, as seen in previous programming sessions, it was determined that for this session, a full physical was not necessary. A gestural prompt still ensures the best opportunity for success. So that is the best prompt to go in with right after an incorrect response. However, should I have seen a incorrect response after giving a gestural prompt, I would have immediately gone into the next trial with a partial physical, and again going back up should the client have been incorrect. At the same time, we do want to give the client the most amount of independence possible, and so we would, if the client is showing over consecutive responses during the trial teaching that she is being successful and accurate and quick, then we would try and fade out to a lower level of a prompt. So finally, a couple of challenges that I faced in terms of the sessions for the client. One was that initially, when being instructed to match, the client would take the given word strip and she would scan it to her credit, but then she would take a little bit of time. She would take the word strip and kind of move it above the other three in the array back and forth, making some robotic noises, again, all in fun for her before placing it down. However, this really took time away from from the programming aspect, especially in terms of correct criteria, because again, for the criteria to be given a correct response for that target, she should be able to do it within 5 seconds. So we went in with a proactive approach, is that for the following targets, we had a quick little chat about what a quick job looks like. I quickly modeled it for her that this is what a quick job looks like. And she was reminded to do as quick of a job as possible and reinforced for that, as well as doing a good job in her acquisition sessions. The other challenge we faced was that when the client was presented with the array before she was given the word strip to match, if the array was not perfectly, the three words were not perfectly aligned with each other, she would be adjusting them to make sure they were perfect. And again, one of the things that it did was distract her from her current task and also delay the program. So again, as a proactive approach, we did two things. One was to discuss that everybody has a different way of doing things, and so when somebody does something, it's not always polite to correct them. They may perceive it as rude, and really went to talk about that it's not a very big deal if things are not perfect. The other thing that we did was, instead of myself shuffling the array between every trial, we had given the client an opportunity to shuffle it just to ensure some control. That is it for the program. I really appreciate you listening. Again, I'd really like to thank Mohawk College and Missing Links for their collaboration and for the opportunities I was exposed to. They are absolutely invaluable for me. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. I will be happy to give as satisfactory a response as I possibly can. Thank you again. Take care.